The theme that I had at the beginning of the year, and with the results that we saw coming in at the beginning of the year, particularly for the small sector, we were seeing companies under pressure, margins under pressure, and funding of business is extremely difficult, given, of course, the slack demand. But we're beginning to see a turnaround in some of that in the recent results that we have seen. Are there any particular sectors that have stood out for you?
Well, I think in general what we've seen is that we've had some capital raisings, but for the most part, companies haven't gone insolvent. For the most part, they've managed to pull through. This has been one of probably the most serious financial crises we've had since the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Certainly, South Africa has proved not to be as resilient an economy as potentially we had hoped, and that we followed the global recession into the slump.
Right.
But what we've seen is that, and I guess what some of the people were worried about was that some of the small caps were going to implode, as we've seen kind of 10 years ago.
Sure.
But we haven't seen that. We've seen companies with assets, with real balance sheets. Some of them were a bit overextended, but not too badly.
But what would you attribute that resilience to? What was the main determining factor, do you think, that made the small caps particularly survive in this difficult economic environment?
Well, I think a lot of these businesses, a lot of the small caps have now been around for many years.
Right.
Either in a listed or an unlisted state.
Okay.
And I think what you've got is companies with management that's been around for some years, that have seen business cycles. We've got companies that they've got real cash flows, they've got real profits, they've got real reasons for being in business.
Yeah.
And so they managed themselves through that. They didn't necessarily do well.
Sure.
They didn't necessarily continue to grow their earnings as I suppose we always hope for as investors.
Absolutely.
But in that environment, I suppose flat earnings to slightly down earnings isn't a bad result.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I've seen people propagate is that we had a government that was spending while the rest of the world and the rest of the economy indeed was contracting. And as a result, we have companies, particularly in the construction sector, not doing too badly. But we also had small mining companies also surviving the recession and the impact relatively intact.
Correct. I think we could divide those small mining companies up by their commodities, obviously. So for the likes of kind of the gold and the platinum type companies, those were the guys at the sharp end of the wedge, and they really got hurt when the metals prices plummeted. And we've seen some fallout there. But I guess if you kind of go on to the more stable, or what have proved to be more stable or defensive kind of energy type mining companies, there you've seen some resilience.
Yeah. Now we're beginning to see companies increasing capacity. For instance, we heard the other day that Coal of Africa, their Vele project, they're expecting production to begin, I think they said, in the third quarter. And we're also seeing, I had an interview the other day with the CEO of Ellie's, his name is Wayne Sampson, I think. Yeah, we had a chat, and he was talking about expanding their power business. So we're beginning to see companies spreading out and increasing that capacity. I suppose that would be positive from an investor point of view.
Well, I think there's a global theme that's playing out here that you can see in the smaller, and you can see it in the larger companies too. Essentially, it's the energy theme. The world is short of energy. We need energy. On the one side, you've got the greenies, the ecological guys looking to reduce the carbon footprint and all that nice stuff.
Sure, yeah.
But at the same time, you've got development happening. You've got development, particularly in Africa. There's a major theme of electrification in Africa, in the Middle East, in developing areas, where people are they never had electricity before. Now electricity infrastructure is being built. You need that to develop your economy.
Yeah.
And so these things are important. And what you're seeing really is an offtake of the energy providing commodities, for example, coal. So Coal of Africa plays directly into that space, into the power space, and also into the metallurgical coal side, where they supply coking coal to ArcelorMittal.
Yeah, I always say those guys are, they are well-meaning about environmental issues and that and so forth and so forth. But I say, first of all, please give us the lights that you have, so that we can have the clean energy that you so crave. But anyway, moving on to another subject, Adcoop, we saw coming up with the trading update today.
Yeah, we saw that.
It doesn't look too bad, but I think it was the amortization cost that they associated with an acquisition the previous year that knocked HEPS down 32%.
Correct.
But operationally, it does suggest that the business is sound.
Quite right. So what you've got is a non-cash impact, really. It's an accounting impact in the numbers that makes the numbers potentially look a little bit worse. You've kind of got to dig past that. And they make that clear in the trading statement. So they do give you the numbers. And really, on that basis, you know, if you look at the actual, as you say, the operating performance of the business, it doesn't look that bad. You know, we know AdCorp's got the bulk of their business is temp staff placement. We know the industry's just been through quite a rough period of turmoil where there were some, you know, legislative overshadows, you know, banning of labour broking and those sorts of things. We now have seen that there's completely, or what seems to be an about turn in that space, and that the government actually is not planning on banning labour broking, but regulating it properly so that the services can continue to be delivered without taking advantage of those individuals. And I think you'll see AdCorp grow from strength to strength.
So quickly, Lance, are investors beginning to respond to these positive results?
Well, I think we're seeing a little bit more liquidity at the small end of the space. In a lot of the alt-tech stocks, you're seeing a little bit of recovery in some of the companies, in the share prices. Potentially, we're seeing maybe a little bit of risk appetite returning to the space. But watch this space. Let's see what happens.